Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum students. This is Tariq. In the previous lecture we discussed the concept of indifference curve. We defined indifference curve, we developed the data table, and we graphed the indifference curve. Today we will discuss a few properties of the indifference curve. The very first property, that indifference curve is negatively sloped, because there is negative relationship between the x and y, where x is a Pepsi and y is pizza. If the football player, he want to increase Pepsi, so he has to decrease pizza. The relationship between the two commodity is negative. That is why the graph is downward sloping curve. This is very clear from this graph, which is convex to the origin, negatively sloped. 1 Pepsi and 16 pizza. When football player increase Pepsi to 2, he decrease pizza to 12. So relationship is negative. That is why graph is downward sloping curve. Second property, indifference curve is mental phenomena. It represents utility of the consumer, choice, taste, and preference of the consumer. Third property of the indifference curve, marginal rate of substitution. What is marginal rate of substitution? Marginal rate of substitution along the indifference curve is diminishing. This is a third property. What is marginal rate of substitution? The rate at which football player replace Pepsi for pizza. This ratio is called rate of substitution, and this is very clear in the third property, that this marginal rate of substitution of the IC curve is diminishing. So diminishing, decreasing marginal rate of substitution. Marginal rate of substitution along the curve is diminishing, decreasing. Why? Means the rate at which football player is decreasing pizza and increasing Pepsi, that is diminishing, decreasing. Why? What is the reason of this behavior of the football player? The reason is this, that the commodity which is already used more in quantity, its utility will be less for the football player. Like pizza, football player carry 16 pizzas, quantity is high, he is fed up from the pizza. Football player does not need food item, but Pepsi X is only one bottle of Pepsi, so it's mean football player need Pepsi and he does not need pizza. Marginal utility of the pizza is less and marginal utility of the Pepsi is more. Let me take you to the data table. As this is the data table, this is the first combination where football player purchase 1 Pepsi and 16 pizzas. At this point, pizza is more in quantity. Football player does not need more pizza. Marginal utility per unit of pizza is very small, but Pepsi is very small in quantity. Marginal utility per unit of the Pepsi is very high. That is why consumer want to replace Pepsi for pizza, and he is jumping from the first combination 116 to the second combination B, which is 212. From this point along the curve, 116 to 212 to this point B, football player want to jump, increase Pepsi and decrease pizza. So he in the very first step, when he is changing from the combination A to the combination B, the rate of substitution is calculated, that is -4, where negative sign shown negative relationship between the pizza and Pepsi, that if Pepsi increase, pizza will decrease. And 4 is the rate of replacement. For 1 extra Pepsi, football player will give up, sacrifice 4 pizzas. So he will switch to the second combination, 2 Pepsi and 12 pizzas. Now, when producer switch from the combination B to C to increase 1 more Pepsi, football player is sacrificing, giving up only 3 pizzas, not 4. So this rate of substitution first was 4 and second is 3. This is diminishing again to change from combination C to D. So the rate of substitution calculated, that is from A to B minus 4, from B to C 3, and from C to D, that is minus 2. So again this rate of substitution is diminishing, decreasing. And why this is decreasing? As I told you that in the beginning, when football player has more pizza but less Pepsi, he need Pepsi, that is why he is sacrificing, giving up for one Pepsi 4 pizzas, because the marginal utility of the pizza is very small for the football player, but marginal utility of the Pepsi is very large. That is why the Pepsi utility is more, and he is replacing Pepsi for pizza, and rate of substitution is 4 pizzas for 1 Pepsi. But in the second combination, to change from B to C, the football player reduced this rate of substitution from 4 to 3. Now to get 1 extra bottle of Pepsi, he is giving up, sacrificing only 3 pizzas, and the third combination to change, he is sacrificing for 1 extra Pepsi only 2 pizzas. So rate of substitution is diminishing. The reason is this, that as Pepsi is increasing, its utility is decreasing. But when pizza is decreasing, its marginal utility for football player is increasing, because he is athlete, he is football player, he is running. So when pizza is decreasing, again and again decreasing, he will be in need of pizza in future. That is why he is taking care that to avoid the situation that now football player carry the more Pepsis but no pizza. To avoid this situation, that is why football player is decreasing the rate of substitution 1 by 1, 4, 3, 2, 1. Why? That as the Pepsi increase, his utility decrease, the need of the football player is fulfilling. That is why he is reducing this rate of substitution. Let me read this. In the beginning, if consumer has more Y but less X, so utility of Y is less and utility of X is comparatively more. It's mean in the beginning, player carry more pizza and less Pepsi. So that is why the Pepsi utility is more. So this is good to increase Pepsi and decrease pizza. That is why consumer is replacing Pepsi for pizza, and to increase 1 unit of Pepsi, consumer has to reduce 4 units of pizza, because the utility of the Pepsi is more than utility of the pizza, and the commodity which provide more utility to the player, definitely player will consume that commodity more. When 4 units of Y reduce, the utility decrease by 4 utils, but as 1 unit of Pepsi increase, utility again increase by 4 utils, and utility remains same along the indifference curve. In this way, when football player is changing from one combination to the other, the utility is decreasing by reducing pizza, and the utility is again increasing by the same amount by increasing Pepsi. As consumer increase X more, its utility decrease and Y is decreasing. Means when consumer will consume more and more Pepsi, so consumer will player will feed off from that. Utility will diminish, but player is decreasing Y, so it's mean Y utility is increasing. That is why along the indifference curve, consumer reduce the marginal rate of substitution X for Y. I am again summarizing that rate of substitution along the indifference curve is diminishing. The reason is this, that when consumer increase X, the utility of the X is decreasing for consumer, and decrease Y, the utility of the Y increasing. That is why, to avoid the situation that Y is less and X is more, football player is reducing the rate of substitution along the indifference curve, and that is why indifference curve is getting convex to the origin, and the graph is like this, that this is convex to the origin. That is the reason diminishing marginal rate of substitution is the reason of that graph is convex to the origin. This is convex to the origin. Now we will switch toward what is consumer equilibrium. Consumer equilibrium, the point at which consumers spend the total money in hands on the combination of two commodities in such a way that consumer get maximum utility, maximum satisfaction, and consumer is satisfied from his consumption pattern. This situation is called consumer is in equilibrium. The situation when consumers spend the money in hands on the combination of two commodities in such a way that he get maximum utility. This situation is called consumer is in equilibrium. Now we will switch toward the firm behavior. Before this we discussed consumer behavior, and now we are switching toward the firm behavior. In this section we will introduce the concepts of isoquant curve and isocost line. In the firm behavior we will introduce other two curves and line, isoquant curve and isocost line, where isoquant curve represent the output level of the company when the company use the two input factors like labor and capital, and isocost line define the budget, the cost of the company when the company is purchasing the input factors like labor, capital, raw material, energy, etc., etc. So in the firm behavior our focus is on the isoquant curve and on the isocost line. Isoquant curve, let me define. Isoquant curve is the set of points. Each point represents the combination of two input factors like labor and capital, and each combination will provide the same output level along the isoquant curve. So isoquant curve is the set of points and it defines the output level using the two input factors labor and capital, and along the isoquant curve the output will remain same. Let me develop a table for the isoquant curve. Again the same table as we developed for indifference curve, the same A, B, C, D, E combination. Now we change Pepsi for labor and pizza for capital, 1 labor and 16 capital, 2 labor and 12 capital, 3 labor and 9 capital, and these are the rates of substitution, and so on. So a graph of the isoquant curve we will plot from these combination, that the first combination carry 2 inputs, 1 labor and 16 capital, as this is 1 labor, labor is along the x-axis and capital is along the 16 axis. This is the one point along the vertical axis, 1 labor and 16 capital. Now to change the combination, increase 1 labor, producer decrease 4 capital. Further, to increase 1 labor from 2 to 3, producer decrease 3 labor from 12 to 9. So again this is like indifference curve. This is a negatively sloped curve, and isoquant is the set of points. This is very clear from this graph: point 1, point 2, point 3, point 4 and point 5, A, B, C, D, E. And this is the table to develop this isoquant curve. Isoquant curve is a set of points where each point represents the combination of two input factors, and the isoquant curve represents the output level. This curve represents output level of the company and different input factors combination: 1 labor 16 machine, 2 labor 12 machine, 3 labor 9 capital, and 4 labor 7 capital, and 5 labor 6 capital. So the set of points, and each point define the combination of two input factors, and I am again repeating that isoquant curve represent output level of the company, and indifference curve represent utility of the consumer, isoquant curve represent output level of the company. How we can graph? Again, this is the graph which define the different combination. First combination, 1 labor with 16 capital, second 2 labor with 12 capital, 3 labor with 9 capital, and so on. Now the properties of isoquant curve. Isoquant curve carry few properties. The very first property, that isoquant curve represent output level of the company. using two input factors, labor and capital. Second property, isoquant curve is also negatively sloped. Why? Because there is negative relationship between the labor and capital. If the producer want to increase labor, producer has to reduce capital, and in this way the curve will be negatively sloped. Marginal rate of technical substitution is diminishing along the isoquant curve. Third property, that marginal rate of technical substitution along the isoquant curve is diminishing. Why I am putting here marginal rate of technical, T stand for technical, this T stand for technical substitution. This means that producer is replacing labor for technology. So that is why we differentiate marginal rate of substitution of indifference curve from the isoquant curve marginal rate of substitution, which is marginal rate of technical substitution, where T represents the replacement of labor for technology capital. Marginal rate of technical substitution is the rate at which producer replace labor for capital. Marginal rate of technical substitution is diminishing. Why? Again, the same explanation as we discussed for indifference curve. Marginal rate of technical substitution along the curve is diminishing. Why? Because in the beginning, at the first combination, when capital is very large and labor to operate the capital is very small, so capital is not productive. Labor is 1 and machine is 16 machines, so one labor cannot utilize the machinery fully, so its mean productivity of the capital is very low. Let me take you back to the table. This is the first combination where labor is 1 and machine is 16. Now one labor cannot manage 16 machine. That is why the marginal productivity, MPL, marginal productivity of the capital is very small, and marginal productivity of the labor is very large. It means this is good for the company to increase labor and decrease machine to increase the output of the company. That is why producer is changing the combination from A to B to increase one more labor. Producer reduce 4 capital, 4 machine. Why? Because the quantity of machine is more. It's not working. Marginal productivity of the capital is very small. One machine productivity is only 1, but one extra labor productivity is 4. That is why producer replace labor for capital, increase one labor and decrease 4 machines. In this way, to change from the B to C, to increase further one labor from 2 to 3, producer reduce 3 capital. So this rate of substitution diminish in here. Again, to change from C combination to D, to increase one more labor from 3 to 4, producer decrease machines from 9 to 7 and reduce 2 machines. So it's mean the rate of substitution is diminishing. First combination 4 rate of substitution, second 3, 2 and 1. This rate of substitution is diminishing. Why? The reason is this, that in the beginning machines are more, labor is small, so this one labor cannot operate the machine. MPL of the capital is small and MPL of the labor is large. That is why when the input productivity is high, definitely the company will increase that input, and the input which productivity is small, definitely the company will reduce that input. So in this case, the productivity of the labor is more and productivity of the capital is small because it's not working. Labor is small in quantity, labor cannot manage this much huge capital, so producer is replacing labor for capital, increase one labor and decrease for capital. So when we study in the indifference curve also that as the labor increase and machine is decreasing, now labor will get overcrowded, machine will get small and labor is more, and now labor has to wait for his turn. So it means labor is not productive, productivity of the labor is decreasing and productivity of the machinery is increasing. So that is why, to avoid this situation that labor is very large in quantity and capital is very small in quantity, producer decrease the rate of substitution along the isoquant curve to manage and fully utilize both the input labor and capital fully and produce maximum output level. So this is the reason that to avoid the situation that the MPL decrease and MPK increase, to To avoid this situation, producer reduced the rate of substitution along the isoquant curve. Let me repeat again marginal rate of substitution, this theory. In the beginning, if producer has more capital but less labor, so MPK, marginal productivity of capital, mean output of the capital is less and output of the L is comparatively more. Labor is more productive than capital, so this is good to increase the labor and reduce the machine. That is why consumer is substituting, producer is substituting labor for capital. And to increase 1 unit of labor, producer has to reduce 4 units of capital, because the MPL of L is more than the MPK of K, means productivity of the labor is more than the productivity of the capital, which is 1/4. Capital produce 1 unit, extra unit and extra labor produce 4 units. So when 4 units of K reduce, marginal productivity of the capital decreased by 4 units, but as labor 1 unit increased, productivity again increased by 4 units, and the total output remains same along the isoquant curve. That when producer, we write in the definition of the isoquant curve that each combination produce same output level. So same output level in the sense that when producer will reduce labor, this is your isoquant curve, when the producer will increase labor by 1 unit, decrease capital by 4 units from 16 to 12, definitely the marginal productivity of the capital decrease, mean output of the company will 4 units decrease. But when producer increase 1 unit labor, so output will again 4 units increase. The marginal productivity of the 4 capital is equal to the marginal productivity of 1 labor. 4 capital decrease output of the company by 4 units, but 1 labor increase the output of the company again by 4 units, and when the output decrease, it again go back to the level, and that is why isoquant curve represents same output level on each combination. So the reason that why this rate of substitution is diminishing along the isoquant curve is this, that when labor increase, its productivity will decrease, and capital decrease, its productivity will increase, because now machine will be available, labor will be available, but machine will not be available. To avoid this situation of the company, producer decrease the rate of substitution along the isoquant curve. Let me take you back to the table. That first point substitution is 4, 3, 2 and 1. This is diminishing. Now we are switching